Hello everyone. In this episode we will take a look at the opposite of virtues, vices. Let's break them up right now. Vices are the opposite of virtues. They are habits as well, but they make the trajectory of the self go further from the end. And therefore they can be understood by reversing the 7 virtues. The opposite vice to faith can generally be understood through 3 acts: unbelief, blasphemy, and ignorance. The first one does not apply to lack of knowledge, which obviously cannot be a vice since it lacks connection with intellect. Rather, it is repulsion towards truth. People who think the earth is flat and are fully aware that almost every human being believes that it's not, they have the vice of unbelief. Blasphemy is similar and connected to unbelief, but it is differentiated from it by the fact that blasphemy is an active attack towards faith, while unbelief is merely lack of compliance. Therefore, blasphemy is the worst of all vices, and blasphemy towards the end, which is the good, is blasphemy towards goodness itself. It is hating something infinitely good, and it's therefore the ultimate vice. Lastly, ignorance. It is not the inherent stupidity of someone, that's unwilled, it is the resulting vice of not caring about something. You know those people who say that they don't care about something, and thus willingly remain ignorant about it. That's the vice of ignorance, which prevents them from obtaining faith, which is a virtue, and therefore ignorance must be a vice. The vices opposite to hope are desperation and presumption. They are polar opposites, because one is the absolute lack of faith, the doomer view of the world, thinking that everything is going down and will always keep going down. It is opposite to hope. But presumption is also a vice, since it is the absolute certainty that everything is going to go just as planned, and therefore nobody has to do anything because everything is fine. Think about it. If I had been presumptuous, I wouldn't have made this channel, and some people watching it, maybe even you, wouldn't have come to know all of this. But the same outcome would have happened if I was desperate and didn't want to make this channel, because I felt like it would be useless. Desperation and presumption are thus opposite, but lead to the same evil outcome. Hope is in the middle, and it's a virtue, just like Aristotle would say. Now, the vices opposite to love. They are hate, sloth, envy, discord, offense, and scandal. Hate is the direct opposite of love. It's therefore the most serious of all vices, and it is connected to blasphemy, especially blasphemy against the end. Hate of the end, and blasphemy towards the end are very similar, but not identical. Hate is intrinsic aversion, while blasphemy can be motivated by something other than intrinsic hate. For example, you can go against dogs because they are dogs, or because they have some characteristic you don't like. The first one is hate, and the second one is blasphemy. Sloth and envy are degenerations of love. Sloth is not enough love, which then doesn't push you to do good acts, while envy is too much love for yourself, which then pushes you to be egotistical and hate goodness when it happens to other people. Discord can be understood as the opposite of peace. It is the vice which brings war, creates schisms, starts fights, and seditions. This last one is basically tempting people to get used to vices and acquire new ones. Now the other 4, starting with the opposite vices to prudence, which are imprudence, negligence, and prudence of flesh. The first 2 are obvious: lack of prudence which brings death and excessive prudence which brings motionlessness. But the last one can fool you. Prudence of flesh, in fact, is a vice, because it seeks to preserve what is material as its ultimate end, while ignoring to preserve what is immaterial, which is the true end. People who just seek to protect their bodies will end up overlooking their souls, which is what's really important. Against justice we can identify two kinds of vices: those who are committed against the victim's will, and those who are committed in accordance to it. The first ones are homicide, injury, theft, robbery, disobedience, ingratitude, lying, flattery, avarice, and prodigality, and the second ones are fraud and usury. Honestly, in my opinion, people who have these vices are tremendously insufferable, maybe even more than those who oppose faith. Now we have the vices opposite to fortitude, which are fear, fearlessness, daring, ambition, vainglory, pusillanimity, and meanness. Basically every kind of excess and lack of fortitude is a vice. Finally, the vices opposite to temperance are gluttony, drunkenness, lust, incontinence, anger, cruelty, pride, and immodesty. Temperance, as we know, is all about moderating one's desires. All of those vices lead to unpleasant outcomes, such as obesity, cancer, damage, hate, sadism, snobbishness, and disgust. Generally these things make other people see you as a disgusting piece of shit who deserves to be executed. Now, you may have noticed some familiar words here. These 7 vices: sloth, envy, avarice, gluttony, lust, anger, and pride, are often known as the 7 capital vices. They are not necessarily the worst or most serious ones, but they are worth taking note of because they are the most widespread ones, and the ones from whom the most evil things come. They are, in a sense, the most dangerous of the other vices. Finally, we have a clear understanding of what actions are vices as well. Now we just need to know what happens if you follow virtues or vices. After all, we still haven't talked about why willing the good should be done, and willing evil should be avoided. Next time we will talk about what happens when we follow the good. Until then, be well.